breaking down everyday workplace issues and diagnosing the hidden sickness, not just the obvious symptom. Our hosts, James and Kobe.
Did we lose a patient?
No, that's just my lunch.
Hey, thanks for joining us. I'm Kobe, he's James, and let's talk leadership.
Yeah, so I'm excited for this new format. This is one of the new formats that we're introducing with the start of season 4. We've had really great responses to the Q&A session episodes that we've done. And the last season, we introduced the practical psychology for the workplace series, which has been a lot of fun, and we've had really good response from that now. So we want to do leadership tips. It's going to follow kind of the same format of, 3 different topics that we want to talk about and try to provide some just practical tips around things that come up on a regular basis about leadership.
Yeah, so we, often work with leadership teams and we often kind of help with kind of building some kind of like leadership training structures, and we do a lot of like, kind of one-on-one kind of professional development with leaders when, in the organizations that we work with to kind of help them address things that they're going to need for new changes that we're going to make, or just making a more robust, more thoughtful, more intentional leaders. And again, and often that falls back to our integrity leadership framework, which is something that often gets adopted when we're looking at kind of leadership development stuff. So we thought with leadership tips, it'd be a lot of the conversations that we have with the organizations that we are working with presently, callbacks to past organizations that were things that, these kind of sparked up some ideas from previous clients, stuff like that. But we're hoping that we can bring a small idea to anyone here that's on any kind of leadership journey, and be able to kind of go, here's something that you maybe hadn't thought of, or here's a little bit of advice and something very tangible you could take away to try today or tomorrow. And that's really kind of our hope with these leadership tips. So hopefully these will end up becoming very helpful for folks. And we're pretty excited because these are some cool things that we never really get into with the kind of the normal format. So I'm really excited to have these. So I think what we'll do is I'll just kind of keep us on track and kind of introduce it, and then I'll let you
Well,
kind
we
of
know I'm
start
not
in
going to
with it.
keep us on track. So
No,
somebody has
no,
to.
that's right. So I will bear that burden. But yeah, so why don't we start off with our first one?
Okay.
So this is kind of like the difference between being friends with your employees and being friendly. So friends versus friendly.
Yeah, and so this is a big one that comes up often. It's something that we kind of touched on in a previous episode. Honestly, I don't remember what season it was, but kind of talking about how do you manage previous coworkers. So
Mhm.
it's some we'll definitely touch on that element to it. But what I really want to focus on is really how, as a leader or a manager, how do you walk that line between being friendly with people, but understanding that your role as a leader or manager is not to be everybody's friend, because you cannot effectively do your job if you're constantly trying to please everybody, if you're constantly trying to be everybody's friend. And this is actually a topic that I really like. And in my less than humble opinion, it's something that I think I do quite effectively. Because
Yeah,
my
you do.
leadership style is very similar to my podcast style. It's very similar to just regular James is a weird and quirky and sarcastic human being.
So what
Um,
you're saying is there's not a lot of depth to you. You're pretty much a one-trick pony.
Oh yeah. What you see is what you get. This is the
Yeah, that's
entirety of me. But
I
it's
can
also
validate that as 100% true.
but it's also part of my leadership style, right? Like
Yeah.
when I'm working with teams, when I'm whether we're talking fractional work or interim work,
Mhm.
my approach tends to be very casual, very relationship based. I
Mhm.
enjoy, gathering around the desk and chatting with people and cracking jokes and being my regular sarcastic and obnoxious self.
Hmm.
Somehow it works for me, but I'm not going to question
Yeah.
why. Um, but really, there is a fine line to walk. And
Hmm.
knowing, like, I am fairly easy to, like, I enjoy joking around with people. I'm fairly easy to talk to. That comes across as quite authentic to who I am. It's
Yeah.
nice when you actually hear that feedback from people.
Yeah.
But there's never really a question about when James is speaking as the leader, as the manager, as the director, as whatever role I am filling.
Well, just say, yeah, I mean, you're right, because when you, yeah, because, you specifically are very good at, again, like creating a very casual, very laid back environment. You're very, very good at corrupting psychological safety in those that you work with and those that report to you. But there's never any question that, like that you are not have no issue having hard conversations. You have no, that there's, that you have a very laid back approach and you put people at ease because partly because you don't take yourself very seriously, but it's a matter of you don't take yourself very seriously, but you can be
I
very
take the
serious
work
and have
very
very serious
seriously,
conversation. You have
right?
to work very seriously,
And
and that is a good
that's
way to.
really the difference, I think.
Yeah.
Because if you're going to walk that line, you have to address
Hmm.
problems head on, right? You can't
Yeah.
let them slide because of you want to be people's friend. You can't, and
Hmm.
it's going to ruffle feathers, and people are going to be mad at you, and you have to be comfortable with people not liking you for a while. But if you are
Yeah.
continuously acting, if how often do we talk about consistency? Like,
Yeah.
really, the
Yeah.
key to everything
Hmm.
is consistency. Because if you are consistent in your jovial nature, in your relationship building, and in
Hmm.
your expectations around performance and what's acceptable and what's not, and you are
Hmm.
treating everybody equitably, you're treating everybody with the same approach, and you hold yourself to that same standard, it can be an
Yeah.
incredibly effective way of building a very casual, fun, but serious when
Hmm.
necessary environment.
Yeah, it can be a casual yet professional environment. You're right. And I think going back to one thing that you said earlier about, the idea of it's not about being people's friends, that your role as a leader is not about having friends because friendships come with privileges, right?
Yes.
Our friends are there to take care of us. Our friends look out for us above all else. And that's something that just can't really exist kind of in the workplace to have to have a functioning manager employee relationship. But you really can't be that way. Or at least it can't be that way without clear lines and clear expectations being drawn and being articulated and being very transparent about.
Yeah, the privileges piece, the friendship makes this complicated because
Mm.
if you are walking into a new organization, it's a bit easier because you don't have the long-standing relationships, right? Unless you were friends with somebody outside of work previously and they happen to work there, right? So
Yeah.
there's a bit of a different dynamic and there's different ways to approach this in different situations. And I think
Hmm.
it's easier if you don't have that pre-existing relationship. So, and I don't think there's a lot that we need to really dig down deep into in that situation because
No,
it's
probably
really
just that
about
whenever you walk in, say whenever you walk in, is that it's just to manage expectations and be clear and transparent and be like, I'm laid back and easygoing until this point, but I have no problem having hard conversations. As long as you're doing right by me or any organization and each other, I have your back. But if not, I have no problem shutting things down and letting you go. Like
I think it's really
just making sure
important to
people know.
emphasize that you don't have to be casual either, right? Your
No,
leadership style
no,
also
absolutely.
has to be authentic to who you are. I am
That's a very
a dork who likes
yeah.
to joke around, who plays
Yep.
video games, who
Hmm.
is a bit quirky and weird and
Yep.
incredibly sarcastic.
Oh yeah.
That comes across. But if
Yeah,
that's not you,
you're right.
don't try to force it because it's not.
No.
This is really from that perspective is if this is who you are, you can absolutely
Mhm.
lean into it and be very effective in a leadership role as long as you are maintaining professional boundaries.
Yes, and the thing too is that a leadership role shouldn't change who you are.
No.
A leadership role should allow you to bring yourself to the job, but you still have standards you have to meet. You still have to have hard conversations. You still need to be a clear communicator. You still need to be upfront and consistent, and all those things have to be there. But you're right. There's not one type of great manager. There's lots of different styles and types, and often there and it's the key is for authenticity. Be
Yeah.
yourself, but be yourself with clear expectations and be yourself with consistency. And that's really kind of the key to that side of it. But I do think that it is worth us digging into a bit, going back to that episode we talked about managing your former coworkers
Hmm.
and digging into the parts about how do we, like how do we maintain the friend versus friendly piece when we have been promoted or managing people that we have, long-term friendships with or that used to be coworkers and we have that coworker relationship with, and now I'm their boss. Like, that's probably where a lot of the hardest part of this comes
Yeah.
into.
And the danger with this, we'll get into the strategy, but I want to be clear about what the problem is with this approach. And the problem is that it's very, very easy for this to turn into a perception around favoritism, around
Yeah.
preferential treatment, around,
Hmm.
the haves and the have-nots, right?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
there's not much that's going to deteriorate your workplace culture, your team dynamics, your credibility as a leader. Will like if you are treating different people in different ways, some get privileges, my friends get this,
Hmm.
everybody else gets the dregs.
Right.
You will that is not good. I'm sure
No.
we all can think of experiences we've had through our careers where you've encountered people like that.
Right.
It does not create a welcoming, productive, harmonious, fun, casual, whatever adjective you want to put in there that's positive. It does not create a
Mhm.
positive environment.
No. No. No, it doesn't. Now, again, like I've stepped into a number of leadership roles, some that I've known. Actually, most of the leadership roles I've stepped into, I've known somebody that's reported directly to me, or I've been promoted internally. And one of the tricks that always works for me is I acknowledge the different hats that I wear in that role. So, like again, it's I've stepped into organizations where people that I've worked with in past jobs that had great coworker friendships with now report directly to me in this,
Mhm.
when we step into these kind of interim roles or whatever like that, or even in my past jobs. And one of the things that I learned really quickly that was really helpful is acknowledging the different versions of Kobe that are existing. So I would say, as the CEO of this organization, this is what I think, and this is what has to happen. As your former coworker or someone that cares about you as a person, I feel differently. But unfortunately, this isn't your coworker's decision, your former coworker's decision. This is the CEO's decision, so this is what we're going to have to do.
Yeah.
And acknowledging that duality makes it clear that I'm not, that they understand that I feel for the situation. I wish I could do more, but I'm responsible to the organization.
Yeah.
Right. It's funny. I have the conversation the most often when someone comes to me, like someone that works for me, reports to me, and says that they've been given a great job opportunity.
Yep.
And I'm like, okay, so as the executive director or as the managing partner or whatever it is, I think that it's very that you are too valuable here, that we should, that your role is so vital, and I want to find a way to kind of keep you, or I want to find a way to keep you and kind of have you progress with us. But as Kobe, your friend or your former coworker, this is too good an opportunity for you to pass up. You should really consider what's best for you because this could be a golden opportunity that you may allow you to really get to where you want to be
Yeah.
and share both sides of that with them.
And what I really like about your strategy there is how it allows you to respect the pre-existing relationship.
Yeah.
But you're also able to act consistently within the
Hmm.
bounds of the different hats that you wear, right? So
Right.
Kobe, the CEO, Kobe, the director, needs to be consistent in their actions and in their communications. Kobe, as a
Mhm.
friend, should be consistent in their actions and in their approach, right? So it allows you to respond with consistency and clarity, respect the relationship that's pre-existing, but also maintain that operational need. Because
Hmm.
when you like a situation that you're responding to as the leader of an organization, you have to put what's best for the organization first, even if that's not what's best for your friend. And if you
Hmm.
don't, that's going to be very apparent. And it
Right.
secrets don't last in the workplace.
Yeah.
Like you can't do this on the down low and have it never come out.
Hmm.
People are
Yeah.
far too attuned to
Mhm.
inconsistencies and
Yeah.
accusations of being hypocritical. Like
Yeah.
it's gonna come back and bite you.
It is. And so for me, whenever I use the multi-hat approach, I I do it kind of at the very beginning when I'm kind of having my initial kind of onboarding to the new teams, and I kind of say, I say, especially if I build, relationships with you all. So it's not always about having a past relationship. Sometimes if you work with someone for the long time and you come to really respect them,
Yes.
and you say, as someone that cares about you, that becomes a hat.
Yeah.
And you have to again acknowledge different hats. So I do that at the very beginning when I start to say, I will tell you when, who is talking when we're in these situations. And how that plays out is like, so if I have to pull someone into my office, I'll say, this is a conversation that you're having with the CEO right now,
Yeah.
and tell them, have the hard conversation to someone that I care deeply about, that they don't want to hear but is necessary. And I do that. Other times I need like to pick the brain, or kind of having like almost like I'm struggling with with something that may be more of like, kind of a crisis of conscience or this or that, and someone that I built a good relationship with, whether previously or kind of in the work, I can say, I need to kind of talk to you as like, as Kobe the human being right now. And then kind of something that they know I'm not directing them as their boss. I'm really just coming to them as one human to another. That managing expectations, managing the situation, explaining that brings a lot of value to the way that you build the relationships, because it is the way that you can be friendly with people but still allow for the authenticity and the way that those different complex relationships, acknowledging, respecting all of them,
Mhm.
while letting them know who's talking to them in this moment.
Yeah, and as long as you're being consistent,
Hmm.
I think the most important point in all of this is that there is no single right way to be a leader.
Yeah. Yep.
It needs to be true to who you are. It
Hmm.
need because if it's inauthentic, it's gonna feel really weird and forced, and you're not gonna connect with people. But if you are being
Yeah.
true to who you are and acting in a consistent manner with clear expectations, it your personality is secondary, right? Like you can be
Mhm.
yourself. And this is where, like for me, what I've the reason I really like frameworks over systems in terms of leadership development, because a leadership style or a leadership system tends to try to force the individual into conforming to whatever the parameters of this system are, right?
All right.
It tends to be more about this is what success looks like in a leadership role,
Right.
where
So you
a
need to look this
framework
way to do that.
yeah, but a framework like we talk about our integrity leadership framework a lot, and it's a
Mhm.
decision making framework really. And it's not about
Mhm.
your personality, it's not about your approach, it's about making sure that when you are making decisions, you have this support to rest on,
Right.
so that you're being
Mhm.
consistent in your application of rules, so that you're acting with moral courage and you're using the influence that you have in a trustworthy manner, right? It's less about conformity and more about how do you bring the awesomeness of your personality to the leadership table and be consistent and effective in that role.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I think this has been a pretty good discussion, and hopefully people have some type of helpful takeaway. I'm hoping that the multi-hat approach is something that if any of you are struggling with the friends versus friendly approach or friends versus friendly situation, that multi-hat piece could actually be something that might be worth trying. I think that's a pretty
Yeah.
tangible thing for people to take away. All right, so let's move on to the next one. So let's talk about responding versus reacting.
Yeah, this is an interesting piece because we see this a lot. Um, I, I'm just going to jump right to the end. The solution to this is to have a plan.
Yeah,
Fundamentally,
yeah.
it comes down to plan beats no plan. If you don't know where you're going, if you don't have a clear goal in mind, strategy approved, operations, human capital, what have you, if you have no plan, you cannot respond to a situation. You can only react. If you have a
Yeah.
plan, you can respond. You can make a decision that moves you closer to your ultimate goal. But if you don't know what that goal is, then you are just reacting to each situation as it arises and creating more chaos.
Yeah. And one of the things too is that we talk about reacting a lot when we talk about our action versus reaction fallacy, where the
Yep.
idea that a reactive workplace is the norm, and by reacting, that's what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to just be reacting to things as they come. You're supposed to be just reacting to crises and problems. It's the nature of the work,
We
and
have
that is
to
an absolute
react
fallacy.
to when there's a new when something happens, we have to react. They tend to use
Yeah.
the language of respond, right? We have to
Yeah.
respond
Yeah.
to new priorities. We have to respond to changing factors. We
Mhm.
have to respond to emergencies that, staffing or what have you. But if you don't have a plan, you're not reacting.
You
You're
are
not
reacting. You're
responding. You
responding.
are reacting. Yeah.
And that is really it. The main difference between the two is you react to a situation and you need to figure it out in real time with the information that you have. And responding means that you're responding to a situation with a plan and a process, and you're implementing the plan or process to the situation. And those are massively different things. And a workplace that is built on responsiveness and a workplace that's built on reaction are night and day.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we talk about, the faces of HR and how, kind of that firefighter mentality of, always just jumping from one problem to another to another to another. Part of that is oftentimes it's an under-resourced HR department. But
Yeah.
part of it
Highly reactive.
also, what's that? The highly
Highly
reactive.
reactive.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
and it often comes from that being under-resourced and not being properly supported, but it also can come from a lack of a strategy, right? A lack of preparedness of how are we going to respond when situations arise.
Yeah. Yeah, and the thing too is that we don't only respond to bad things. We
Yeah.
often respond, or sorry, we either react and respond to bad things. We often react and respond to good things too. Like it's a matter of like, so if you do you have a plan if you land a big client or you
Yeah.
double your sales in a quarter? Like, because again, those are still things you have to react and respond to.
Yeah,
And a
well, I mean,
matter of
we
are you?
had that exact situation with a previous client who, like,
Yeah,
they incredible opportunity. They wanted to grow their business, they wanted to grow their sales, and they said we need to hire a really high performing, effective sales team in order to bring in more clients. Great. They had a plan. They executed that. They found really great. They were able to build a really effective HR. It's always on my brain. Sales team, and they were incredibly effective. They doubled their monthly revenue over a 3 month period. And then they realized, oh, we don't actually have the internal capacity to deliver on all of this great work that our sales team has done. We didn't in our planning, we decided we wanted to hire somebody and we decided where we wanted them to focus their time, but we didn't think about how do we actually fulfill the orders? What do we do if they actually surpass our expectations? Right? They didn't have the internal capacity to actually meet the new production demands.
Yeah, so we
So
walked in, they were in absolute firefighter mode, just trying to react
they were
to whatever it
reacting
was
to
and figure it
everything and
out.
just running around trying to get stuff done.
Yeah, yeah, because they didn't have a plan. And that really is it, is that if you don't have SOPs, like standard operating procedures, you don't have policies to how to handle stuff. If you don't have a strategy,
Yeah.
you react. And that is what a reacting heavy workplace is one that just does not have those structures in place, does not have a plan, has not thought proactively. So they're just reacting to stuff because they have not put the time and effort to make a plan and a strategy of how to handle things before they needed them.
Yeah, and I mean, when we were chatting about this topic before, obviously, recording the podcast, you had a really great analogy that I thought was important around the first responder piece.
Yeah, so the idea of like when so because a lot of organizations that we've worked with, and we've worked with some in like the medical field, we've worked with some that are highly like like major actual emergency and crisis, actual life or death.
Yeah,
And one of the things we hear from them is like, well, we have to do that. It's the nature of the work. We have to react. And I would be like, no, you don't. I was like, when paramedics arrive to an accident scene, they don't run around going, oh my God, what do we do? There's a car accident. They don't do that. They walk in, they ask the same questions, they survey the scene, they calmly implement their training and their pre-planned strategy to how to effectively respond to an emergency.
yeah,
That's what they do. They're called first responders, not first reactors, because they respond to emergencies with a plan and a strategy, SOPs, the whole thing. They don't just show up and figure it out when they get there.
yeah,
So there's no situation, no business, no emergencies that you should be reacting to. You should always have a plan, always have a strategy, always be responding
yeah.
because you should have put the time and effort to put plans in before you needed them.
And there's going to be situations in your business where you are going to encounter something that you did not anticipate.
Yeah,
That is just
of
the
course.
nature of life in general. Um,
Mhm.
but if you have a strategy, if you have a plan, if you have an operational strategy, a human capital strategy, a business strategy, like if you have these different strategies that are interconnected, that you know where you're trying to go, when the unknown inevitably happens, you have at least something to guide your decision making, right? You know
Mhm.
where you want to ultimately end up, and you can respond to the situation, maybe not with a fully fleshed out plan of how you're going to handle this unique, unforeseen, random thing that came up, but you can act with a plan of how does this situation get us to where we need to be. But if you don't know
Right.
where you want to be, how are you ever going to respond to that in a positive way?
I think a really good example of that was so where we live right now, we've been dealing with a close by out of control wildfire.
Mhm.
And one of the organizations that we're working with has a site that's not too far away from kind of the outer area
They're close to
the
the
evacuation.
evacuation zone. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like this was something they were like, "Oh my gosh, we don't have a plan for what happens if there's a wildfire in our area because that's never happened before." So, no fault for them for
Not
not
to
having
this
a
scale,
plan.
certainly. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So there was so part of it was like so work with them and say hey okay so let's not just figure out a reaction plan now, let's actually make a plan for all the locations for these kinds of emergency evacuations and everything else like that too, because again it was like we didn't have a plan for this, but that identified a gap in our plans and our SOPs. So let's do that. Let's put those plans into place for all of the sites,
Hmm.
all locations, whether it is fire, whether it is flood, whatever it is, any kind of evacuation order, we know what we're going to do. So sometimes you're right, we don't always think of every single situation, but how you move from reaction to responding is when you see a gap, you put the plan into place so it's there for next time.
Yeah. Yeah. And as you are developing all these plans, you'll start to also identify commonalities, right? So a plan that you developed for a different situation, there may be elements to that that will help you respond properly to the unforeseen event.
Yeah, because I mean, like, think about why we have fire drills, why we have lockdown drills, right?
Yeah.
We are preparing to respond to a crisis. It's not, like, and that's what those are. Those are preparations to of a response. So it's one of those things where there really is not a situation where a emergency or a crisis or just a really big deal like, like doubling your sales, that should happen and you should react to more than once.
Yeah.
The first time you identify the gap, make a plan, get a strategy, put SOPs into place so that way you are react or you're
Yeah.
responding next time, not just reacting when it happens again.
But this is also why strategies cannot be developed in silos, right?
Yeah.
They need to be connected to the larger or overall picture, right? Because this client had a marketing strategy, and that
Hmm.
marketing strategy was incredibly effective. The
Yeah.
problem is it was completely divorced from their operational strategy and from the human capital strategy. And so it
Right.
created a lot of problems because it was developed in isolation without considering the unintended consequences of success.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I think the really helpful piece of advice versus the responding versus reacting for people to take away really is going to be the idea that you need to just accept that a plan, a strategy, standard operating procedures, policies, those are used to allow us to respond. When we
Mhm.
don't have those things, that's when we react. And it's understandable if you can't plan for every eventuality, but when something happens, your debrief should be part about planning a new policy, a new SOP, a new structure, so that way if it happens again, you're ready, you're prepared.
Yeah.
And that's really, I think, something that leaders and managers need to accept as one of those things. You may not be able to have full control over the big shift of all SOPs and strategies, but you can be prepared for what you've already gone through. Maybe how could you have done it better next time? But you should not be caught twice with the same problem. You should have a plan the second time around.
Everybody makes mistakes, just don't make the same mistake twice.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so why don't we move on to our third tip?
Okay.
So this is talking about handling the emotional load.
Yeah, so this is an interesting piece because we don't often talk about emotional load in the context of the workplace. And so I think it's important to kind of just clarify what we mean by emotional load in the context of like workload, workplace, environment. And so we all know what workload means, right? It's the amount of stuff on our plate related to work that we have to get done. It's what keeps us busy and occupied and employed on a
Yeah.
day-to-day basis.
It's our duties, our responsibilities, all those the tasks, all that kind of stuff.
Exactly. It's our workload. And
Right.
equally important to understand is the emotional load that people are carrying. This could be an emotional load that's driven by an unrealistic workload, which causes additional stress and burnout and anxiety. And, it's not captured in the workload assessment or workload conversations, but it's still weighing people down. It's still the emotional load that it takes, the emotional toll that it takes on people affects everything else. But work
Mhm.
emotional load can also be what sometimes might be referred to as, personal baggage. External factors that uh, impact your emotional capacity that can impact how things play out in the workplace.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the things that is important to acknowledge with emotional load is that it's the weight that our jobs and the stress that we have in our lives kind of put on us. But one thing that is really important for people to understand that the person that gives you your emotional load really is you. That
Yeah.
that someone else can't give you an emotional load. Someone can give you a workload. Someone can create the conditions for you to give yourself a high emotional load, high stress. A reactive in workplace that's constantly putting out fires is a great example of how
It
you can
creates an
build a
incredible
strong.
emotional load, right? A
Yeah,
a
yeah,
a toxic manager who micromanages or like any of the right people having to
yeah.
walk on eggshells. That's part of the emotional load that you're carrying.
Yeah, but the thing is that, but it is something that you give to yourself. It's the stress, it's the worry, it's the anxiety that you kind of give to yourself is really kind of what the emotional load is. So unfortunately, you're the only one that can lighten your emotional load.
Hmm.
And the thing is that, it's one of those things where when we go in and we talk about like kind of like sometimes we do like workload assessments and kind of calculations when we're trying to like, get a feel for organization and capacity and that kind of stuff like that. And one of the things that we don't measure, but we often talk about individually with people is about is about their emotional load and how they can start tracking their emotional load
Hmm.
because really you can only track it really like with mindfulness and self-reflection because the idea is that if our emotional load is weighing us down, then it makes the work that we do harder. It makes switching gears take longer. It makes us spin out faster, and we're not bringing our best self to work when we're carrying a high emotional load. So part of it is we need to make sure that, we understand what if people are maxed out, how much are they maxed out with the actual work expectations, task performance they have to deliver on, and how much are they maxed out because of a high emotional load that they're carrying? Because sometimes it's really important to kind of separate those two.
It is. And this is something that I'm seeing in one of the clients that I'm supporting right now is there's been a lot of uncertainty, a lot of transition, and work has been piling up on a couple key people, and the stress that causes them, their own dutifulness of wanting to make sure that everything gets done is also adding to the emotional toll that it takes. And so one of the things that I've been reinforcing with this team time and time again is that you are the only person who can prioritize yourself. And part of that is building strategies to be able to manage it. Part of it is also having somebody who's in your corner to help either take stuff off your plate or to, recognize that you can't you can't be all things to all people all the time. It's going to wear you down and it's going to, even though you don't want it to and you're doing it to try to make sure that work gets done, it's going to affect your work and it's going to affect your performance over time. And so, like, emotional load is it can almost be insidious, where it's
Mhm.
not recognized, it's not talked about, but it's felt very acutely by people who are experiencing it.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember talking about emotional load recently with a group, and it kind of came up in the context of kind of like, how could they find more time to take on some of the stuff that interests them more with their work and like
Mhm.
because if they feel like they spend so much time trying to like deal with issues as they arise and kind of and the complexities of leading people, but they stuff that they have passion projects that they want to work on. And so I was talking to them about that. I brought up emotional load, and they were like, and someone was like, "Well, I don't want to be more productive. Like, I mean, like, like I'm quite, I deliver on all that I need to, but they said that that's not really what I'm looking for. I'm like, well, no, you're missing the point. I said that the understand key to trying to find a way to lighten your emotional load is you get all your work done in the day, and you're a high performer, but how much is left in your tank when you go home?
Yeah.
Right? Like how much, if you're going home with a dead battery, then, what do you have for your personal life?
Yeah.
Right? And then are you at a deficit when you show back up on Monday because then the stress is at home add that you can't act on, so part of it is it's that idea of, the emotional load, we obviously can't leave them separated in a different, whether we're home, whether at work, but it's about how much of your energy is being robbed by the weight of this of your emotional load. And if you can find ways to lighten that, you can find ways to kind of like, compartmentalize. You can find ways to, not carry stress and guilt and worry about stuff that hasn't happened yet and deal with anxiety. If you can find ways to kind of mitigate that, you'll find you have more to bring to the job. You find you will be more productive, and you can do the things that you want to do, the passion projects. But you'll also go home with more energy, and you go home with maybe half of a full battery.
Yeah, and honestly, this is something that if you're in a leadership or a management position, and this is resonating with you, I'd really encourage you. There are some absolutely phenomenal leadership coaches that we've worked with who like this is a big like there are things that you can do yourself. Um,
Hmm.
and I strongly encourage you to do that. But you also don't have to do it alone. There are
Yeah.
people who can support you and an effective leadership coach who, your style and their style mesh and you like it can be an incredibly powerful way to build the coping I mean it is coping mechanisms, right? Because we're talking about stress and anxiety and all of the emotional toll that this takes. um
Hmm.
don't be afraid to ask for help because it's hard to do it all on your own.
Yeah. Absolutely. And the thing too is that because again, this is a bit of it requires a lot of self-reflection, so a lot of mindfulness to really kind of capture where this is coming from and to figure out strategies to kind of like start to mitigate that emotional load. And again, if that's not something that you feel equipped to do alone, then you probably shouldn't. You probably should have some extra help because again, it's something that, like, so again, some of the things that you can start to look at is how big is the problem. So again, you want,
Mhm.
so a tangible takeaway for today, you're right. A great longer term takeaway is connect with a leadership coach. If you want some recommendations, we have some great people that we'd be happy to share their contact
Yeah,
with
reach
anyone
out
within
to us
us
and
that
we will point you in to people who we have worked with, who we've seen the quality of their
Mhm.
work and who we trust.
Absolutely. But I mean, even before then, tracking your emotional load through scaling can be very helpful. So when you show up on Monday, where is your emotional load? Is it a 3 out of 10? 10 being high, 1 being none, and then as the day goes on, maybe check in kind of mid-morning, at lunchtime, mid-afternoon, end of day. Where is, after you have an interaction with somebody, does your emotional load kind of go up or down? And being aware of the triggers, being aware of the stuff
Yes.
that causes all of those things, right? And then what do you go home with? And then if do you go home on Monday night with like, a 6, is a 6 out of 10. What are you coming back with on Tuesday? Are you back to like, a 3, or are you now a 5? And so again, it's just more being mindful of the things, identifying the stress triggers. Because again, some of it is like guilt. Guilt is it's a big cause of emotional load that some people, especially managers, don't want to carve out the time that they need for themselves. They always want to be responsive. They always
Yeah.
want to be there, whether it's on the workday or not. How much of that guilt of not being there if you need it to be, or if you need to carve out stuff to do work on reports or to do your own tasks, and you feel guilty about telling people that during these 2 hours I can't work. does that guilt create emotional load? Because then that time wouldn't be useful because you're so guilty, you're not getting anything done.
Yeah.
Being aware of the emotional load that you're carrying is the first step to knowing how can I solve it? Because if it's a big problem, then maybe you definitely need the external help. If it's just a small problem or you think it's manageable, maybe you can do it yourself.
Yeah, what I really like the scaling idea. I'm absolutely shocked that you would come up with an investigation as a initial strategy. Let's diagnose
Okay,
the problem. Yeah, not on brand at all. Um,
not on brand.
I did have a point. I'll try to remember what it was, but this is what causes a lot of burnout in
Yeah.
even with highly productive, high capacity people. The
Yeah.
emotional load can cause significant problems. And I think you're absolutely right in terms of as a manager or as a leader, constantly trying to be available to your team all the time and responsive and, putting them first. Sometimes you need to just block off time and I'm not available to you because I've got to get X, Y, and Z done. Right? It's
Mhm.
why people like work on the weekends or like try to get caught up because they're not making a good plan through the day of how to effectively use their time if they're constantly feeling guilty about, not being able to respond to every question and concern and thing that comes up through the day for their employees or for their team.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. One thing I've suggested to people that have trouble with that is is put a sign on your door or a sign on, a sign near your desk. I'm unavailable until this time. And you give yourself an hour
Yeah.
to just say no distractions, no one bother you. You put your phone on silent, you close your email, and you just work on the stuff. But like you said, but you let people know I'm unavailable for an hour.
I would
And
schedule it.
then,
I'd put it in your calendar,
yes.
blocked off
Yeah.
so that, you're not
Mhm.
getting interrupted with Teams calls or whatever else. It's, every week on Thursdays from, 1 o'clock until 3 o'clock is my time to do my administrative work or my reporting that's required or whatever that piece is.
Yeah.
Cons Amazing. Consistency is really going to help you.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay. I think we did a decent job covering those three things. I really
Well,
hope
I know
that
I
people
did.
have some,
I'm less concerned,
well,
less confident in your answers.
well, thank you. No, it's funny. The one thing about going back to emotional load, I think that I probably could, like, I was tempted to a couple times, especially when we were prepping, to dig into like the psychology part of it and talk about like, like how our cortisol levels kind of impact us, kind of the cognitive impact of it and everything like that. But I'm glad that we stayed on tack, making it really more about tangible management, leadership tips. However,
You
if
can nerd
anyone's
out on that
interested,
on a practical psychology for the workplace episode.
yeah, so how about this? If you're listening to this, go into the show notes section, and from there you can send us a message. Send us a message to see if you'd like us to dig into the psychology parts of emotional load a little bit more and kind of dig into that and some more tangible pieces, not just for managers, but just kind of broad in general. Maybe how can we handle our own emotional load better? Yeah, because if people are interested in that, I'm happy to dig into that a little bit more. But yeah. No, I think this was a good leadership tips episode. I'm hoping that people really found some tangible pieces to walk away with.
Yeah, it's great. And I hope you like it because we're still going to do it anyways.
Short of a court order, it's going to keep happening. Okay, so that about does it for us. So for a full archive of the podcast and access to video version hosted on our YouTube channel, visit roman3.ca/podcast. Thanks for joining us.
For more information on topics like these, don't forget to visit us at roman3.ca. Side effects of this podcast may include improved retention, high productivity, increased market share, employees breaking out in spontaneous dance, dry mouth, aversion to the sound of James's voice, desire to find a better podcast.